Good afternoon, Travel by Water here. As we discussed in my last video, we are going to look at some voyage planning tools. Today we're going to take a look at one voyage planning tool in particular. We're going to take a look at Google Maps and Google Earth and how I use that to help me plan voyages. Now, Google Maps is a huge tool, and so I'm not going to go into every feature. I don't know every feature that Google Maps has, so I'm just going to focus on the tools that I use and have used for voyage planning that are available in Google Maps. So some of the things that we'll take a look at is how to estimate distances, how to get a good bird's eye view on different things, landmarks and shoals and beaches. We will take a look at finding landmarks. We'll look at how we can use Google Earth to observe currents on the surface of the water. And we will take a look at My Maps, how you can save working maps to use again in the future. Okay, so one of the things that I use Google Maps for quite a bit is for estimating distances. Now this isn't as precise as walking distances off chart, but it's easy and it's fast. And sometimes maybe you haven't bought the charts yet for an area that you're considering because you don't know if it's a viable voyage. So you can kind of start to estimate distances before getting into buying charts. Now for me, to measure distances, I prefer to have it just in this view rather than in satellite. Okay, so let's just say hypothetically we were planning to circumnavigate this island here, Howe Island. Okay, so you right click on the map, where at your starting point, choose measure distance, and just start clicking off waypoints to as if you were sailing your boat around the island. Okay, and there we have a very quick route around Howe Island without observing any depths or anything like this. This is just a rough estimate of distance. So we started here and we finished here. As you can see, the distance around Howe Island is approximately 32 kilometers. If you go down here, I've got the distance in both kilometers and in miles. So it gives 31.89 kilometers or 19.81 miles. Now that is in statute miles. To the best of my knowledge, Google Maps does not have a nautical miles setting. So you can either do kilometers and divide by 1.825, or you can, just do miles as a statute miles as a rough approximation. But keep in mind the nautical miles, a nautical mile is slightly larger than a statute mile. Okay, so we'll take a look at that from a kind of a practical point of view. So let's say you're months away from a trip. You're just trying to plan if a trip is going to be viable or not. You know the rough speed of your boat. So let's say we're in my Bayhen 21, and we know that 25 miles is a pretty good distance to travel for the day. So what you can do is say you're assuming you're starting in Brockville, and you just start measuring off the distance until you see where 25 miles will get you. And as you can see all the islands, but you can't see depths or marked channels. So this is just for a rough approximation, and you just keep walking it off until you reach 25 miles. And you can kind of keep scrolling along on the map like this. Okay, so there we are there. We're at about 22 miles, and we found that puts us at Hill Island, which has good anchorage and docks. So I'll scroll out and we'll see what that looks like. Okay. So this would be, more time consuming with walking out with a pair of dividers on a paper chart for sure. You can switch over to satellite to see kind of what the terrain is looking like. Darker water is generally going to be deeper, and lighter blues are going to be shallower, so that'll give you some indication, but you will need to check with a proper nautical chart before you plot the actual course. This is just for early planning stages. Okay, and here's the same exact same technique, except this time we're running down the west coast of Florida instead of through the Thousand Islands, and you can see, okay, so Tampa down to Venice and to this pass here, and we've got the distance 70 kilometers or 43 statute miles, so you'll have to convert to nautical miles or just accept the fact that it's a rough estimation, and you can get a closer look at that pass that is ahead of you by clicking on the satellite image. Okay, it takes a couple minutes to load, and you can take a look at whether that's going to be a suitable place to pull your boat into or not. And I would say this would be a good spot to get a Bayhen 21 into. It looks like a nice deep pass. So there we go. Okay, so the next technique we're going to look at is we're going to look at using satellite imagery to wayfind your way through a pass or through reefs or into a harbor. So if you look at the the NOAA charts for this region of Florida, this pass here is shown as essentially unpassable. You know, it's just that dark blue water. It's a very blobby type of rendering, like you see here. In Google Maps. Now, if we switch over to Google Earth, though, we see a very different story, and we see that it might be possible to take a boat like my Bayhen 21 through that pass, even though the chart doesn't really give a clear indication of whether you can or not. So let's take a look at how this looks on Google Earth. So on Google Earth, it's not just a blue blob. You can see that there is shoaling coming out from the point this way, some shoaling coming out from the point this way, but there is a relatively deeper channel that goes right up through the middle if you kind of approach from due south and head kind of due north through the pass. Keeping in mind a Bayhen 21 only draws 9 inches, so this might not be charted for a deep draft vessel, but for a very shallow draft vessel like a multi-hull or a Sharpie, you can get into places that might be impassable to larger boats and therefore are not charted. So that's one way to get a look in between reefs and shoals. Okay, here we are back up north again. This time we're on the Rideau Canal, and you can see the Google Maps rendering of this lock station and tie-up area is very blobby. You can't really get a whole lot of information from it, except that you know where the water is, and the chart rendering, the Canadian Hydrographic Service chart rendering, is very similar to this. You can't really get a whole lot of information aside from knowing where the bridge is and where the water is. But when you look at this same area from Google Maps, you can learn a lot more information. From Google Earth. Okay, so sometimes it takes a while to switch over, and now we see an entirely different story, right? So now we see this wasn't visible. This is the big tie-up wall. This is where you tie up for the night when you're in Merrickville, okay? And you can actually see what the locks look like. You can see how much dock space is available. You can see the tour boat dock, and you can also see that this lock station, this tie-up wall, is at the top of a power dam. So there's a strong current running here, and the water flows through this area, through the power dam, and into these rapids. So you definitely want to be careful when maneuvering your boat here. And this is something that you definitely would not have learned by looking at the nautical chart or at Google Maps. So let's take a look at some more places where we have some power dams that are adjacent to a channel that could be problematic. Okay, so this is another good example. Now, the Canadian Hydrographic Service chart would definitely show that the boat traffic, that the channel runs this way. So it does definitely give more information than Google Maps, and it does show depths. But what is missing from the image on both the chart and on Google Maps is what the actual geography of this area is. So if we switch over to Google Earth and look at the satellite imaging, we can see that there's a row of buoys here that prevents you from going over a stone arch dam here into waterfalls and rapids here. Now again, you have the main channel going along here, and you've got another waterfalls that comes through here. So there's water being sucked out of the canal here and down these waterfalls. So this might be useful information if, say, you were paddling a canoe, that you might want to stay to the right of the channel and not get sucked over those waterfalls. Okay, and one last look at shoaling. So here we are, Cape Lookout, North Carolina. You've got white for land, blue for water. The chart, of course, will show depths up to a point, but it won't show the very shallow depths because those areas aren't charted, because hydrographic survey boats need deeper water than, say, a Sharpie does to operate. So when we click on satellite imaging, we get a very different picture of the type of shoaling that is in this Cape Lookout area. You can definitely pick out the deep water channel, and you can pick out individual shoals, and you can even see that there are multiple channels that could potentially be taken by a very shallow draft boat. Okay, another thing that we will look at is recognizing landmarks. So what we're looking at here is Confederation Basin in Kingston, Ontario. So the charts for this area will essentially show just basically a blob for the marina, whereas Google Earth actually shows where all the slips and docks are. Okay. But we can get even more detail in a city like this by clicking on this little man and dragging him into the city. Okay, so now we are actually standing on that pier, and we can look at what the city looks like as you enter. So you know that you'll be able to look for this fortification here, this hotel, this steeple. Those are the landmarks that you're going to be looking for when you're making landfall in this city. Okay, so there's one example. Okay, here we have Toronto Harbor, just a big blue blob. But if we want to take the man, drag him to where we want to see, and we can get a much better look at the city. So we'll see what the city's waterfront actually looks like. So you'll be able to look for landmarks using this technique. Okay, it gives you a much better view of what you can get from a chart. Okay. Okay, and if you want to manipulate the maps, you can click on the menu up here, and you've got all sorts of things you can do, including print, so that you can take it with you on a piece of paper to look at later. Okay, so there's the menu over there. Of course, locations are searchable. I think I think people know that, but there we go. We'll search for a location, and the map will go straight to it. Okay. So rather than finding it on the map, you can just Google it and it'll find it for you. And one last thing I want to take a look at is My Maps. So this is where you can go into Google Maps. You can create a route, and you can save it for later, so you can manipulate it or check on it. So here we have a couple of maps that I created back in 2016, and they're still saved in My Maps. So one is called the Thousand Islands Cruise, and the other one is called the Maine Duck Pirate Adventure. So we click on that, and we can see the map that I created back in 2016, including where I plan to spend each night, and distances and that sort of thing. And I've got a description of each location here. So night 2, Sunday, Aubrey Island, Grenadier. So basically I can make notes on my maps and save them for later use. Okay, so that's my short presentation on how to use Google Maps for voyage planning. Thank you for watching the Travel by Water channel. Have a good day.